what was the process you went through to go find some technology to help you?
Yeah, so when we talk about employee experience, it's in the mind. It's in the mind, it's in the heart. It's not always very perceptible, not easy to measure. So we knew that for us to even figure out what employees were experiencing,
Joydeep Bose, welcome to Rolling Stories. I really appreciate you making the time. As we said, we're going to talk today about employee experience and the investments that Olam has made in that area. But one question I always love kicking off these podcasts with is your entry into HR. Can you explain to us how you first got into HR and what your first HR role was?
Thank you first for having me here. Yeah, I was in a factory. We were setting up a factory in a remote part of India, and I was responsible for managing the human resources function for that factory, which meant hiring workers, coming up with an approach to managing the workforce there. So I had a factory manager who was pretty open to different ideas. And one of the ideas I still recall that we came up with, which worked for some time quite well, was having self-directed teams. And that was the first assignment that I had when I started working.
Okay, so that's your entry into HR. As I alluded to in the introduction, you've got a 30-year career, and I think, if I'm not wrong, more than half of that has been spent with Olam. Just give us the quick background on the scope and scale of the company.
Sure. So we are a food and agricultural company. Any kind of food where spices are used, we are involved in one way or the other. We are the world's second largest coffee company, the world's largest cocoa company, but we don't produce readily available food. We are somewhere in the value chain sourcing the products or producing ingredients to it. And by nature of the business we are in, most of these products have grown in different parts of the world. So we are present across 64 countries. We have 40,000 employees across the world, across these 64 countries. And if you add our non-permanent workforce, we would have another 40,000, so totally around 80,000 employees.
Wow. And so, I mean, again, a company of that scope and scale, challenging at the best of times to manage. What's the HR sort of evolution been if you had to sort of fly over the last sort of 5 to 10 years?
There are two people in our organization, which is me and my CEO. We keep joking between us that we never seem to be getting offers and our jobs have not changed. In a manner of speaking, I have continued in the same job. But if you really see, my job has probably changed many times over the last few years. So just to give you an example, we had a first acquisition 5 years into my job. Then immediately after that first acquisition, over the next 6 or 7 years, we must have acquired close to 15 companies, 14 or 15 companies. So there was a rapid phase of growth which happened through acquisition. So that changed the nature of my role. There was another phase thereafter which happened alongside was when we were largely an asset-light company. So we brought in the capabilities of being a manufacturing organization. So today we have close to 220 factories across the world. So the nature of our organization has changed. Right now, as I'm speaking, we are going through another pivotal moment in the organization. We are reorganizing ourselves into 3 different organizations. My role will also change quite dramatically after we've gone through this transition.
You guys have got an interesting additional focus on employee experience. So how did employee experience become a thing within Olam?
So the mandate that was given to us by our CEO that we would like our organization to be one that inspires all its workforce. Each individual that is in the organization is inspired by the organization. We wanted to reinvent agriculture. And those ideas have to come from the current talent that's there in the organization, the workforce. And for the workforce to be really involved in this purpose, we all need to be inspired. The organization, the leaders need to inspire the workforce. We said that if we want to create instances in the organization where individuals remember those instances throughout their lives, how do we create them? So how do we ensure that some of these moments of truth that happen within the organization as you're working stick on in people's minds as memorable events? That was a start of tracking employee experience and putting employee experience at the center of a lot of what we do in talent management.
Okay, so that's the philosophy. Tell me about how you went through, what was the process you went through to go find some technology to help you?
Yeah, so when we talk about employee experience, it's in the mind. It's in the mind, it's in the heart. It's not always very perceptible, not easy to measure. So we knew that for us to even figure out what employees were experiencing, we had to find a way of putting a finger on the pulse of the employee and sensing what are the experiences like. And we came across Qualtrics, and we found that this platform allowed a much quicker way of accessing employee reactions. It was very flexible. So once COVID hit us, we quickly realized the power of Qualtrics. We wanted to get a sense of what were people thinking about, what were they wanting us to hear. And we rolled out Qualtrics immediately. So we had an immediate survey that went out in 2-3 days' time, and we got responses. And as people were responding, we could glean insights from the dashboards and start working on some of those actions. We got responses from many of these countries, employees saying that they needed PPEs, they needed other supporting materials. So we quickly got into action and we moved stuff across. So Qualtrics allowed us to do a lot of that.
So was it actually COVID that made you realize you can use it for pulse checks, or had you already started?
No, we had already started thinking about having pulse checks, but because of COVID, we focused on getting COVID related information around a host of factors that we wanted inputs on to take decisions. So we used Qualtrics. So every 2 months, we had a survey going out across the organization.
So if you can, and without betraying any of the confidences of or confidentiality within Olam, but if you think about one of those past sort of 2 monthly things, I mean, what kind of feedback are you getting, and how is that used in terms of, I don't know, strategy setting or policy development or so forth?
So I'll take the example of the opening up post-COVID. Opening up for post-COVID, like most of the organizations we were faced with, what should work look like? Should it be completely voluntary, left to people to decide whether they want to work at home or in the office? Should it be hybrid, where some people can work a few days in the office and a few days at home? Should that be a policy around it, and how many days can you work from? We asked people what is it that they would look forward to. A lot of this data that we got through Qualtrics, we were using it in our decisions on how would people come back to work. So that's one way in which really COVID-related inputs through the survey we used in our decisions to open up, and we continue to use them as we are opening up more and more countries post-COVID. So there are many such examples, and vaccination. Our policy towards vaccination was guided by what we heard from our employees. So these kind of decisions are being based on now facts and data that these surveys are allowing us to access.
You're shaping policy around the feedback rather than just imposing a policy that says, "Hey, everybody, we'd really like you in that case to get vaccinated," right? How is employee experience and the Qualtrics tool for an average C-level executive in Olam and maybe your country heads? What are they seeing on a daily, weekly basis? How are they interacting with the data and with the system itself?
So the data that comes every 2 months from the COVID surveys, that's available to all country heads and the HR heads of the countries. They're able to take far more informed decisions. This HR has got additional credibility for being data oriented, because we today, when we're making a presentation, we can just open up the dashboard during the presentation and take the audience to the relevant part of the dashboard and show them real time what the situation is like. So it lends a certain credibility.
I was going to say HR decision making, and then again practically, because I want to kind of give everybody a sense of the day in the life. But business unit head or country head, they would get I guess the system can produce sort of automated reports, or they actually log into the system.
They just log into the system and they can maneuver. There's a dashboard. There are ready templates. They can either go into those readily available templates, or they can configure a template for themselves.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, that is a direct line between data and feedback and executive decision making, right? It did occur to me as well. There are some concerns from employees about who's going to see this data, and the the whole philosophy of answering truthfully and things like that. Did you ever face the sort of concern that people are not giving accurate responses? They're giving the responses that they think want to be heard.
Sure. I mean, that's a question that comes up initially whenever you are introducing a new platform or a tool. And the first question that comes in respondents' minds is how discreet is the system going to be? And it would confidentially be maintained. There is a potential trade off. So we said that any group of size less than 10, where the number is less than 10, we won't go smaller than that. The other thing we did was that the group, which, because these are all internally administered, these surveys, we have a team in a back office which administers these surveys, which is responsible for the Qualtrics tool. So we got them, each one of those members, to sign an NDA. So initially, 3 years ago, we introduced this because we knew there was a question in people's minds that how discreet would their data remain, and we communicated some of these safeguards that we had built in the system to all our employees. I believe today there's a lot more trust because they've seen 3 years going by, and we've been doing periodic surveys, and there's a lot of trust that has been built in. And I think today they accept that this is more to do to improve where we are rather than to identify who said what and take repressive measures.
So they've not seen it used in
In a negative
in a
manner.
nefarious, in a negative way, right? Absolutely. Tell me a little bit about that team then. So how big is it, and where is it, and is it distributed across multiple countries, or is it in Singapore?
We have the head of this team. She's one of my colleagues, and she's based out of Australia. She's a member of the HR team with a very keen interest in Qualtrics, and she was a part of the assessment of the platform itself, the initial team that looked at different solutions out there. She was a member, and she continues to lead the team, the engagement survey team.
I was going to say so that role is to drive the sort of thinking and the strategy and the sort of execution of the plans, and then some I guess survey number crunches, for want of a better term, in a sort of shared service function to.
So that's the back end, so providing a technology that allows us to do things that we would want to do, but they don't always, they're not responsible for showing us a direction ahead. Direction ahead would be our COEs. For instance, the engagement COE is looking at how do we track employee reactions at different milestones in an employee's life cycle in the organization. We want to extend that to other milestones. When a job change happens, someone's promoted and a job change happens, we want to capture relevant experiences and feedback. This feedback will give us first an idea of who's engaged, who's inspired. If you're not engaged, you can't be inspired. And where are the trouble spots? And I see if Qualtrics has to extend itself in terms of its own product journey, that's the area it should look for, where in a very visual way, can it engage employees to provide their feedback in a simple manner.
When do you think you'll be fully saturated? And by that I mean from annual engagement down to key events, maybe even like I said before, a CEO announcement or something like that. You are still, correct me if I'm wrong, you're still in the process of implementing or deploying against those types of events like a promotion and so forth, right? That's an ongoing journey.
That's an ongoing journey, and it's going to change the roles of managers. So when we talk about managing their people, which is a big part of their roles, they today, I mean, we need to get into a future where they open their computers or on their phones, and they look at, depending on the level of the manager, they look at their entire teams, and they find out where are the hotspots. So then it directs them to do things which have the highest impact. So that is like in their business itself. When a person, in a managers who trade, they have a screen in front of them which tells them their position. So they've taken on the business side. So this is a screen on the people side, which populates itself from the various reactions of individuals which come up from the different surveys, and that tells them clearly how are the team members feeling on any given day, and in a non-intrusive manner. So
sure. And I was going to say, it's an interesting point you made there, because without that, we may be making decisions based on the voices of one or two. How many times would that happen, right?
And in the absence of any feedback, we typically go through a set of actions. Like we tell people that once bonuses get announced, you should speak to all your people, have one-on-one conversations. Now, if I have a team of 20, for me to even complete those one-on-one conversations with a team of 20, it could take me a whole week. But then if I have a dashboard which tells me out of that 20, there are these 5 people who are feeling shitty and they could leave within a week's time, I prioritize those 5, and I meet up with them, and I speak up with them and understand what are they feeling, try clarifying on if there are any misconceptions there. So it helps to us to be more effective at our roles as people managers.
Feedback that you get from a manager's point of view, as you rightly said, I've got a trading screen telling me numbers ticking over, but I don't have a similar thing for a pulse check on the organization, right? That's exactly what it delivers. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think if the technology can grow, and as I'm sure it can, how do you see employee experience evolving from where it is now?
I would think that employee experience increasingly would move towards more salient factors. It would be less of whether I have flexi work, because most organizations would make those easy changes.
I often get asked, as you probably do as well, but artificial intelligence, AI, keeps coming up. Can you see a sort of crossover of AI now with this data? Maybe it's suggesting more sort of actions and things like that, or
AI. So today, where we need AI the most, some of the bigger problems in HR is predicting performance. How do we predict performance? The biggest problem that CEOs are facing. So can AI help us in predicting performance and potential? We give them all the data that is there, and look at new data, past performances, past records, and they predict performance in new environments and new settings. So those are some of the areas where the big challenges that we face in HR and talent management. To what extent can AI help us and support us there?
Okay. Last question then. You can now look back on what is a 3-year journey with building this employee experience platform. What 3 or 4 pieces of advice would you give another organization that was thinking of embarking or investing in developing an employee experience platform of the scope and scale that you have established at Olam?
One is being very clear about why we need to highlight, prioritize employee experience. Second, what does the future on employee experience should look for us? And that is an informed decision, seeing other organizations benchmarking. And third is a technology piece, where we retain enough flexibility on the technology piece so that it can meet our needs as they keep changing over time.
Sure. So yes, again, just so I'm clear in my mind, it sounds like the CEO might be bought in, but the other leadership team might be sort of slightly less enthusiastic. Any advice on change management from getting
The first part is not just about the CEO buying. I mean, this my CEO keeps telling me that if I have to push all initiatives across the entire organization, I'll have a pair of very shoulders. So it can't be the CEO shoulder where you place your gun and shoot. But the reason of why is it important for business? Why is employee experience important for business? Once if we get that connect correct, then it becomes easier to convince business managers and business heads that this is important for your business for these reasons.
Of your team and the executive team as well. That's a great way to end the discussions. So Joydeep Bose, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.